Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the class, both to new and long-time students and lovers of history. This is History with Sire here today to discuss with you the final part of this series concerning the Battle of Amiens. This is going to close our series here on these key battles on the Western Front from the British perspective. If you've not already, do check out my earlier videos where I gave you the background and build-up towards this offensive and how the British and Allied troops have performed just before this in 1918. As always, remember this is a lesson catered towards the student level, so we're going to have some key knowledge and historical skills practiced throughout it. With all that said, notepads and pens at the ready, and let us begin. So the situation we left things in at the end of our last lesson was that now the combined arms battle was going to be initiated. General Haig had agreed to it, John Monash had proved it would work. All they needed to do now was launch it across the entire Western Front. How is it going to look? What are they going to do? Well, let's find out. So, they decided to launch the Battle of Amiens, and so the Hundred Days Offensive was finally going to be launched. The Germans had spent themselves for Operation Michael and Georgette and so forth, and now we have ourselves at Amiens ready to launch the attack. At the battle, Haig allowed Rawlinson to launch the attack with the Fourth Army on August the 8th. In assistance, he had help from Canadian Commander Arthur Currie, the gentleman here on the right. The commander had secretly moved his forces away from their defensive campaign at Vimy Ridge, and now he was joining the attack here at Amiens. With support coming from the Australian troops under John Monash and Ferdinand Foch's soldiers in the French army, the British launched their attack. The Germans were completely deceived by this offensive. No longer were there preliminary bombardments, sheer might of 2,000 guns battering the German positions. 600 tanks, with around 70 Whippets, which were smaller, faster tanks, struck hard at the lines, concurrent with bombing from some 800 aircraft. The reserve forces then leapfrogged with the initial frontline infantry attack. As one line of trenches fell, a wave of infantry would then rest within it as the next would press on and take the next line, then the next, and then the next. By the day's end, the Allies had advanced 8 miles while only sustaining 9,000 casualties. In comparison, the Germans had lost 30,000. Ludendorff could only inform Hindenburg a tragic result had occurred. This is the black day for the German army. And he was right. This was the beginning of the end for the German forces. The Hundred Days Offensive rolled on. However, the German line did hold firm in some respects. It was never broken truly for more than a few hours. This was going to take a hell of a lot more than one single battle to achieve. Between August and November, the British would incur a further 260,000 casualties. This works out at a daily loss of about 3,700 soldiers each day. However, despite this, the Allied forces never lost faith in the combined arms offensive. They knew that they just had to keep pushing now. Sure, the Germans were going to break. And indeed they did. Once we get to the autumn, about mid-September, lots more victories began to occur. The Allied forces were beginning to secure success against the likes of Bulgaria. The other Central Powers, Austria-Hungary and the Ottomans, were finally falling. We also have, by the 30th of October, the Ottomans actually signed their own armistice with the British. They were out the war. The Italians also got some key successes against the Austrians, also in October, and by November, the Austro-Hungarians surrendered to the Italian forces. It really was proof that not only had the Eastern Front ended, other fronts were finally closing as well. It's just the Western Front that had to go. Surely Germany would concede as well. And indeed they did. The combined arms battles kept coming, kept launching, and as this 100 Days Offensive had churned on, the German positions began to fall left, right, and centre. The British launched their own successful attacks, then the Americans, then the French. Before you know it, the Marne, the Somme, Ypres, and Cambrai were all transformed from stale fronts into decisive battles of movement. By September 29th, even the Hindenburg Line was finally broken. This, remember, had held firm during the entire Passchendaele offensive and other campaigns like Nivelle as well. But now it was gone. It was broken. Ludendorff could only report to Kaiser Wilhelm that Germany had faced an unavoidable and conclusive defeat. And he was right. By November 11th, Germany signed their own armistice. They accepted a full unconditional surrender, and the war ended. 4 long years in Allied victory. So let us bring it all together now with this key battle at Amiens and the wider Hundred Days offensive. Is this really the blackest day for the German army? Well, indeed, it seemed to be so. This was the breaking point that Haig had always talked about. He had always dreamed they would finally achieve a breakthrough. The combined arms battle had proved a resounding success. The use of tanks, infantry, artillery, and planes had really succeeded here and had forced the Germans back into defeat. From this victory in Amiens, yes, there were still many casualties, and Allied victories truly spiraled afterwards. We had ourselves all these various victories, all these stale, stagnant, attritional fronts were finally over, and the war of movement that was dreamed about was finally achieved. If any proof, the true turning point must have been the collapse of the Hindenburg Line by the end of September. This defence that had held out so strong, that had been shown as the great fallback point for the German forces, was truly over, and the Germans did indeed surrender in November 1918. This was an unconditional victory for the British and her Allied forces and can't be overlooked, can't be forgotten as things have gone forward. Now, it's all well and good knowing what happened in 1918, but we have to understand why the British actually were successful in 1918. And as historians, we should try and make a decision, make a judgment for which one we consider is the main reason, the main factor for why the British did indeed succeed. One thing we can look at is Haig and the other leaders' actions. I'll just give you some general ideas, but we have to understand that Haig and the other leaders had shown signs of clear evolution and transformation. Haig now, while yes, he was always talking, always dreaming of this breakthrough, he understood the need to delegate and give command to other troops. He worked well with the likes of the Dominion troops, with Monash and Curry, and allowed them the freedom to control their parts of the front. We also have some key alliances that occurred with other leaders that can't be overlooked as well. For instance, Monash pulling together this genius idea of combined arms battle, Curry coming to assistance to help the British at Amiens. We have to understand that this is a collective front now. These generals have really come and worked together, and there's other ones we should note as well. For instance, what about the help from the wider forces? I said Curry and Monash there. What about the Americans? What about Pershing and his doughboys coming to the front and providing some much needed assistance, not only at Belleau Wood, but also in other campaigns as the fronts opened up and expanded? Again, they were providing vital manpower to the front. And despite a popular British myth that, oh, the Americans only come in and help at the end, well, no, they've been their presence throughout the whole war. They provided the trade routes, and they've been coming to the front ever since 1917, and we're providing vital assistance that was finally necessary. We also have the perfection of the British tactics and technology. Again, just to name a few, creeping barrage now was finally coming up and being fully mastered. Combined arms was used really effectively at the front. And of course, technology was really getting perfected. We had more machine guns than ever. Tanks were finally proving vitally successful, especially the Mark IV and the new Mark V variants. We also have artillery, as I said, creeping barrage proving very helpful, but also now the artillery actually working and doing its job to break those fronts down. Despite all this praise, though, that we can give to the Allied forces, we should note the Germans did make some errors and big blunders. For instance, maybe launching that spring offensive of Operation Michael was a gamble that was not going to work. Indeed, by launching that attack, they sacrificed any advantages they still held in defense. And so, by doing that, by losing that advantage, maybe they opened themselves up to this massive combined arms counterattack. And a big reason why they failed was because their own initiative, their own paranoia, really, that they couldn't hold out, they couldn't defend. But there is some truth to this. As I said, other fronts were falling, the Eastern Front was over, Central Powers elsewhere were losing, like at Bulgaria, like with the Ottomans and the Austro Hungarians. So maybe Germany just knew it was over and they didn't do this gamble attack. It was nothing. This really was the last roll of the dice to play, and it was worth the effort, even though they lost all the same. Which one is the main reason? Well, that's for you to decide as historians to find out. I can only suggest them to you. Maybe there's another reason you can think of. Do let me know in the comments below which one you believe has the most substantiated claim for it. Maybe even give my further reading in the comment box a read. Maybe make a decision for yourself. Again, the more history you know, the more knowledge you can give into the debate, the better you'll do not just on your own essays, but also in debates, also in general discussions. It really doesn't hurt to know more history. And so let us bring it to a close now as we finish this short series on the Battle of Amiens. Why did the British win in 1918? Was it their technology? Was it the leadership finally improving? Was it tactical developments finally being mastered? Or was it simply the truth that those prior attritional campaigns of 1916 and 1917 have finally paid off, despite the cost and the casualties they brought about? Did they actually finally work? Did they finally exhaust the Germans into defeat, into blundering? Or maybe it was, of course, the arrival of the other troops, Dominion troops finally here in full force, Americans on the way, the French mutinies finally ending. Again, there's a lot to think about, and it's up to you to decide for yourself which one's the most convincing answer. And again, now we have the entire front of the war completed. We've gone right back all the way to 1914, and we've got some big key battles all the way up to 1918s. Again, compare this Hundred Days Offensive and Amiens with other ones like the Somme, like Passchendaele. Have we really seen a learning curve? Have the British troops really improved? Or are they just lucky? Can we say it was luck? Can we say it was convenience? Is this all one big grand plan that finally paid off? And again, note some constants throughout it. Again, maybe go back through this whole video series now, not just here at Amiens, but back to Passchendaele, back to the Somme, even back to when we first talked about the Battle of Mons as well, as initial offensives at the Marne in 1914. Again, look at it. Take each one in turn. Go back. Did technology change? Did tactics evolve? Did leadership transform? Were casualties always high and costly? Try and look for trends as we do in history. Was there a pattern here? Again, to use the old idiom, we're not saying that history repeats, but it certainly does rhyme. And maybe rank for yourself how Britain has actually performed across the whole war. Were they always a truly strong power? Were they second fiddle in a lot of respects? Did they start maybe as beneath the French forces? Did they rise up to be more powerful, more consistent than them? Maybe more reliable as those French mutinies occurred in 1916 and 1917? Or maybe they were consistent throughout. Did they ever really evolve? Was 1918 their best year? Was it the most impressive? It's up to you to decide. I'm merely the teacher here giving you some ideas to think about. And of course, how can we conclude this series? Well, as I said, there is one more thing we have to do, which is return to Alan Clark's thesis and truly decide for ourselves if the leaders were donkeys leading those lions of soldiers into battle. That's what I'm going to close my lessons here on the First World War with. We have one more series to go, which is a focus on the lions led by donkeys thesis. Is it a myth? Is it a reality? Can we take all this knowledge we've learned across the whole war and use it now to make a truly substantiated and consolidated judgment about that issue and make a decision ourselves as historians? Do join me for that, our final video on this series where we'll bring it all together. As always, if you want some further reading, do check out the description box below. What are your answers to these questions? I look forward to hearing back from you. This is History with Sire. Thank you for listening.